Hi everyone, it's Leanne. Welcome to another video on my channel. Today's card is featuring the Lawn Fawn stamp set called Year 8. So each year, Lawn Fawn releases a new stamp set to commemorate their anniversary. And so this is from Year 8, and this features a really cute little piñata. So to begin, I have an A2 size folded card. I'm going to use that top down in that format. And then I have a spare piece of mixed media cardstock that I'm also going to cut from. This is a look at the stamp set, so it's pretty small and pretty simple, but really cute and effective. I just love Lawn Fawn stamps, and it comes with a coordinating die, so I have that as well. And then I'm going to be using these scalloped frames from Lawn Fawn too, and I'll put the link in the description below for all of the supplies. These are the distress inks I'm going to use. I've picked Raspberry, Wilted Violet, and Mermaid Lagoon. And I have a couple ink blenders as well. I have Memento Tuxedo Black ink for stamping. And so to begin, I put down a piece of spare paper just to catch any overhang with my distress ink. I'm going to use the scalloped frame, the second largest one. This creates a border in from the largest size, which is an A2 size. So I'll have a little bit of an edge, and I'm going to pop out the frame. So I'm using a piece of just regular cardstock for this layer. And so I just measured that against the base of my card to make sure that that was the right size that I wanted, and it was. So I'm going to cut this out of my basic cardstock. And so I'll just pop this through my Sizzix machine and just create that frame. Now I'm going to use the frame as well just to measure out my mixed media cardstock. I want to make sure that it's wider than this frame because it is going to sit behind the window. So I have some pencil guides written down on that mixed media cardstock, and I'm going to quickly trim that out with my paper cutter. And so this will be the piece I do my blending on. And just taking another quick look, and it is bigger than the frame and looks generally even, so that should be pretty good. And so now I'm going to pop this frame out from the top layer. This is just the general cardstock. And so here's a look at that. I'm going to save that inside piece, but I really like the effect that the outside piece gave because it matches the scallops in the piñata. So this is just a perfect match, and I didn't realize that until I did it, and I was really happy with that result. Now, as I mentioned, I'll save the inside just for another project. And the great thing about these borders is you can use the outside or the inside. You could stack them and do two together and create a double frame. Has lots of options. So I'm going to get ready here and do my distress ink blending. I'm going to do distress inks in the background, starting with that picked raspberry. And I've just sped this up too so you can see the whole process, not in real time, but there is an option in YouTube if you do want to slow it down, if that's something you're interested in. And then coming in with the wilted violet, just blending those backgrounds together, keeping it pretty even in thirds. And then I'll come in with Mermaid Lagoon. I'm going to put a strip of paper underneath my hands on the left just so that I don't create any marks in that distress ink because it takes a little bit for it to dry. So I don't want to create any bare spots. So I like to come back and just blend those edges a little bit more. And here's a look at the finished card. I'm going to flip it around. I actually like the blue at the top there. Now I want to add a little visual texture to this background. Something you could do is take water droplets and drop them on top and then let them sit for about 30 seconds and blot them off with a paper towel. I actually like the contrast of darker texture better, so I'm just doing ink splatters. So I've smushed down some ink on my palette from those distress inks that I used on the background, and then just taking some water and getting a brush really wet, just splattering some across the background in the color zones that I created them in. So pink in the pink, purple in the purple, and blue in the blue. And I really like this speckled look. And it kind of reminds me of more candy or confetti in the background as well. A really active background for this stamp set, which I think works really well here. Now I'm going to stamp out my little piñata, and I have that on Nina Solar White cardstock, and I stamped out some of the candies too. These come together in threes in the stamp set. There's just one stamp and it has the 3 candies. So I stamped a few. I wasn't sure how many I would use, but I wanted to have extra on hand. Now for the coloring, what I wanted to do is lay down bright color blocks and then do shadows up from the bottom, especially on those scalloped ridges. I thought that that could be really fun to color as well. And so just doing very basic shadows, just one shadow color with a base color. Once I lay down my shadow, I like to come in and blend it out. Just working into the ink with my base color, which is usually my lighter COPIC, just to get a nice blend between those two colors. So for the first top layer, after the yellowy green color, I'm going to come in with this blue. And so when I started doing the shadows here, I started just doing the shadows inside the scallops under each ridge. And I really like that effect, that look. It almost reminded me as if they were kind of crinkle cut or waving in and out with the shadows that way. And I really liked how that looked. So I started pushing along that edge. And so I came back to do the yellow-green and try to color it the same way, just accentuating those rippled edges. And then my last layer I'm going to do in purple and trying to do the same sort of technique. Now the color that I had for my purple wasn't very dark for my shadows, so I came in with another color after, and I'll list all those in the description below too if you're curious about which ones I used. So I'm just blending this out and I'm just working those edges. So here I'm coming in with that darker purple and just really trying to accentuate those ripples on the piñata. And then coming back in with the blue, as the markers dried a little bit, I just came back in with that darker color and tried to beef it up a little bit in those shadows, in those ridges. And so I'm using the main area to color in pink, so his snout and his little feet are in pink. The same three colors that I used for the layers of the piñata I'm using as the tail pieces. And I sort of mixed those up in different orders so that they felt a little more varied. And again, really simple coloring for the tail, just a base and then a base color and then just doing a little shadow out from the base of the tail. I used the same color blocks that I used in the layers of the piñata to create coloring for the stamps, the candy stamps. So there's 3 candies, there's 3 layers of the piñata, so I use the exact same color groupings for each. And because I stamped it 3 times, I did each one in an alternating color. So if I colored the lollipop in blue in the first stamp set, I colored it in purple in the next and green in the last. So there was 1 candy of each type in each color, and it just all worked out that way. I came in with my white gel pen just to put some highlights on my critter and then on the candy as well. I find that doing these white lines, these highlight lines, just makes it look more candy-ish or more like gummy bears or just that jelly kind of kiddish look, cartoony look, and I really like that. And I thought it would work well for this. Now I'm trimming down my pieces so that I can put my coordinating dies on top, post-tape them down, and then I'll run those through my Sizzix Big Kick machine. Now, with the candies, they stamped together, and the dies also were just 1 die for the 3 candies, but they actually popped out 3 separate candies, which I wasn't expecting. I thought it would just be a group of candies, and so that was a nice discovery once it came out of my Sizzix. And so now I've just prepared the work surface here of my background. I've used some kitchen flour just because I want to do some embossing, and I don't want any of that powder to stick where I don't want it. So kitchen flour is really handy and easy to use for that. And I'm using the Versamark ink for embossing as well. This is the clear sticky ink that helps keep the embossing powder in place. So I'm stamping my first sentiment, the biggest part of my sentiment first, and that kind of creates the anchor of where I'm going to put the other words around it. So I have my embossing powder and a piece of folded paper underneath just to catch any embossing powder that I don't need. And then I'm just coming in with that same mop brush that I did with the kitchen flour just to brush off any excess embossing powder. Now I'm just working the other layers of the sentiment up from that base and centering those together, just kind of eyeballing them. And I think putting on embossing powder is the most satisfying part of any card making project. I just love stamping something, not being able to see it, and then you put embossing powder on it, and even though it's not set, you can immediately see what you did and see the result after the fact, and it's just so exciting. It's kind of like magic ink if you ever did that as a kid. It's really fun. So I'm coming in with some embroidery floss. I had some of this left in my craft room, just left over from other projects. I wanted to use a string because my piñata would be hanging from a string from the ceiling at a party, I imagine, at a birthday party. So I thought it would be neat, instead of just drawing it on with a marker, to actually use a string. And so I'm going to tack this on the back with that piece of foam tape that's going to go behind my piñata as well. So I just put the string on the back, making sure that it was lined up where I wanted it, and then pushed it down into place. I'm going to pop another piece of foam tape on the head of the piñata just to support it. And then I'm going to put the string on eventually once I have him in place where I'm happy with him. I'm just checking position, making sure the angle is right that I want, how I want him swinging. I want him to look like he's in movement, not just suspended like straight up and down. So I have him on a bit of an angle like he's swinging, and then I'm going to take the string and just kind of angle that as well, like it's leaning from the left and the piñata swinging to the right, and there's a little bit of tension on that string. Now I'm ready to set the frame up, so I'm just going to put some foam tape around the edges, and I'm cutting it in half because I want just a very narrow piece all the way around, just enough to secure it. It doesn't have to be fully foam taped all the way. And so I'm going to take my art that I have so far and just stick that to the base of my card to get it ready to start building that frame up around it. So just using some tape, roller tape, I have that all ready and sticky and ready to go, and just pushing that into place on my card. I just generally centered it where I felt that it was centered. Now I have all my foam tape around all my frame, so I'm just going to pull that all off. And for this, I'm going to have to eyeball it and just make sure it's as close as possible. It's hard to line it up otherwise. I just had to come in and hold it manually and match up the edges. So I think that's looking pretty good. There's a few more touches I want to do. So I want to bring in the candy. And as I mentioned, I popped out all the candy, and I love that one die cut out 3 separate candies. I was expecting them to be just clumped into groups of 3 because that's the way the stamp came. But it was really exciting that I seen that they were actually different. So this allowed me to really play with the placement of the candies coming out of the piñata. And so I'm happy with the way I've got them there, and so I'm just putting down some craft glue, and I'll put those into place. Again, just using my X-Acto knife, it's super easy that way. And if you can hear a cat in the background, I have to apologize. I'm house sitting for my mom, and I think the cat is really missing my mom, so he's pretty talkative tonight. So here's a look at the final card. I love the colors. I thought the brightness was really pretty. I like the combinations and how this came out, and I really like that speckled background. It just reminds me of extra confetti at the party, I guess. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you're notified as I post more videos, and if you hit the bell, you'll be notified as they are posted live. Thank you so much for watching.